Book 1. Orms and the man I sing who forced by fate and hawked to Juno's unrelenting hate, expelled and exiled left the Trojan shore. Long labors both by sea and land he bore, and in the doubtful war before he won the Latian realm and built the destined town, his banished gods restored to rights divine, and settled sure succession in his line, from whence the race of Elban fathers come, and the long glories of majestic Rome. O Muse, the causes and the crimes relate, what goddess was provoked and whence her hate? For what offense the Queen of Heaven began to persecute so brave, so just a man? Involved his anxious life in endless cares, exposed to wants and hurried into wars. Can heavenly minds such high resentment show, or exercise their spite in human woe? Against the Tiber's mouth, but far away, an ancient town was seated on the sea. A Tyrian colony the people made, stout for the war and studies of their trade. Carthage the name, beloved by Juno more than her own Argos or the Samian shore. Here stood her chariot, here, if heaven were kind, the scat of awful empire she designed. Yet she had heard an ancient rumor fly, long cited by the people of the sky, that times to come should see the Trojan race her Carthage ruin and her towers deface. Nor thus confined the yoke of sovereign sway should on the necks of all the nations lay. She pondered this and feared it was in fate, nor could forget the war she waged of late, for conquering Greece against the Trojan state. Besides, long courses working in her mind, and secret seeds of envy lay behind. Deep graven in her heart the doom remained, of partial Paris and her form disdained. The grace bestowed on ravished Ganymede, Electra's glories and her injured bed, each was a cause alone and all combined to kindle vengeance in her haughty mind. For this, far distant from the Latian coast, she drove the remnants of the Trojan host. And 7 long years the unhappy wandering train were tossed by storms and scattered through the main. Such time, such toil required the Roman name, such length of labor for so vast a frame. Now scarce the Trojan fleet with sails and oars had left behind the fair Sicilian shores, entering with cheerful shouts the watery rain, and ploughing frothy furrows in the main. When laboring still with endless discontent, the Queen of Heaven did thus her fury vent. Then am I vanquished, must I yield, said she, and must the Trojans reign in Italy? So fate will have it, and Jove adds his force, nor can my power divert their happy course. Could angry Pallas with her revengeful spleen the Grecian navy burn and drown the men, she, for the fault of one offending foe, the bolts of Jove himself presumed to throw. With whirlwinds from beneath she tossed the ship, and bare exposed the bosom of the deep. Then, as an eagle gripes the trembling game, the wretch yet hissing with her father's flame. She strongly seized and with a burning wound, transfixed and naked on a rock she bound. But I, who walk in awful state above, the majesty of heaven, the sister wife of Jove, for length of years my fruitless force employ against the thin remains of ruined Troy. What nations now to Juno's power will pray, or offerings on my slighted altars lay? Thus racked the goddess, and with fury fraught, the restless regions of the storm she sought, where in a spacious cave of living stone, the tyrant Æneas from his airy throne, with power imperial curbs the struggling winds, and sounding tempest in dark prison binds. This way and that the impatient captives tend, and pressing for release the mountains rend. High in his hall the undaunting monarch stands, and shakes his scepter and the rage commands, which did he not their unresisted sway, would sweep the world before them in their way. Earth, air, and seas through empty space would roll, and heaven would fly before the driving soul. In fear of this, the father of the gods confined their fury to those dark abodes, and locked them safe within, oppressed with mountain loads, imposed a king with arbitrary sway to loosen their feathers or their force allay. To whom the suppliant queen her prayers addressed, and thus the tenor of her suit expressed: O Æneas, for to thee the King of heaven the power of tempest and of winds has given. Thy force alone their fury can restrain, and smooth the waves or swell the troubled main. A race of wandering slaves abhorred by me, with prosperous passage cut the Tuscan sea. To fruitful Italy their course they steer, and for their vanquished gods design new temples there. Raise all thy winds with night involve the skies, sink or disperse my fatal enemies. Twice 7 the charming daughters of the main around my person wait and bear my train. Succeed my wish and second my design, the fairest Diopeia shall be thine, and make thee father of a happy line. To this the god: 'Tis yours, O queen, to will the work which duty binds me to fulfill. These airy kingdoms and this wide command are all the presence of your bounteous hand. Yours is my sovereign's grace, and as your guest I sit with gods at their celestial feast. Raise tempest at your pleasure or subdue, dispose of empire which I hold from you. He sat and hurled against the mountain side his quivering spear, and all the gods applied. The raging winds rushed through the hollow wound, and dance aloft in air and skim along the ground. Then settling on the sea the surges sweep, raised liquid mountains and disclose the deep. South, east, and west with mixed confusion rule, and roll the foaming billows to the shore. The cables crack, the sailors' fearful cries, as sand and sable night involves the skies, and heaven itself is ravished from their eyes. Loud peals of thunder from the poles ensue, then flashing fires the transient light renew. The face of things a frightful image bears, and present death in various forms appears. Struck with unusual fright, the Trojan chief, with lifted hands and eyes invokes relief, and thrice and 4 times happy those, he cried, that on the Aeolian walls before their parents died. Tydides, bravest of the Grecian train, why could not I by that strong arm be slain, and lie by noble Hector on the plain, or great Sarpedon in those bloody fields, where Simius rolls the bodies and the shields of heroes whose dismembered hands yet bear the dart aloft and clench the pointed spear. Thus, while the pious prince his fate bewails, fierce Boreas drove against his flying sails, and rent the sheets, the raging billow rise, and mount the tossing vessels to the skies. Nor can the shivering oars sustain the blow. The galleys give her side and turns her prow, while those astern, descending down the steep, through gaping waves behold the boiling deep. 3 ships were hurried by the southern blast, and on the secret shelves with fury cast. Those hidden rocks the Ausonian sailors knew, they called them altars when they rose in view, and showing their spacious backs above the flood, 3 more fierce heroes, in his angry mood, dashed on the shallows of the moving sand, and in mid-ocean left them moored the land. A run to sport that bore the Lycian crew, a horrid sight even in the hero's view. From stem to stern by waves was overborne, the trembling pilot from his rudder torn, was headlong hurled, thrice around the ship was tossed, then bulged at once and in the deep was lost. And here and there above the waves were seen arms, pictures, precious goods, and floating men. The stoutest vessel to the storm gave way, and sucked through loosened planks the rushing sea. Ilioneus was her chief, Alethes old, Arcadis' faithful abbess young and bold, endured not less their ships with gaping seams, amid the deluge of the briny streams. Meantime, imperial Neptune heard the sound of raging billows breaking on the ground. Displeased and fearing for his watery reign, he reared his awful head above the main. Serene in majesty, then rolled his eyes around the space of earth and seas and skies. He saw the Trojan fleet dispersed, distressed, by stormy winds and wintry heaven oppressed. Full well the god his sister's envy knew, and what her aims and what her words pursue. He summoned Eurus and the western blast, and first an angry glance on both he cast. Then thus rebuked: audacious winds, from whence this bold attempt, this rebel insolence? Is it for you to ravage seas and land, unauthorized by my supreme command? To raise such mountains on the troubled main, whom I but first 'tis fit the billows to restrain, and then you shall be taught obedience to my reign. Hence to your lord my royal mandate bear, the realms of ocean and the fields of air are mine, not his, by fatal lot to me. The liquid empire fell and trident of the sea. His power to hollow caverns is confined. There let him reign, the jailer of the wind. With hoarse commands his breathing subjects call, and boast and bluster in his empty hall. He spoke, and while he spoke he smoothed the sea, dispelled the darkness and restored the day. Simatho, Triton, and the sea-green train of beauteous nymphs, the daughters of the main, clear from the rocks the vessels with their hands. The god himself with ready trident stands, and opes the deeps and spreads the moving sands. Then heaves them off the shoals wherever he guides his finny coursers, and in triumph rides. The waves unruffle and the sea subsides, as when in tumults rise the ignoble crowd. Mad are their motions and their tongues are loud, and stones and brands in rattling volleys fly, and all the rustic arms that fury can supply. If then some grave and pious man appear, they hush their noise and lend a listening ear. He soothes with sober words their angry mood, and quenches their innate desire of blood. So when the father of the flood appears, and over the seas his sovereign trident rears, their fury falls, he skims the liquid plains, high on his chariot and with loosened reins. Majestic moves along and awful peace maintains. The weary Trojans ply their shattered oars to nearest land and make the Libyan shores. Within a long recess there lies a bay. An island shades it from the rolling sea, and forms a port secure for ships to ride, broke by the jutling land on either side. In double streams the briny waters glide, betwixt two rows of rocks a sylvan scene appears above and grows forever green. A grot is formed beneath with mossy seats, to rest the nereids and exclude the heats. Down through the crannies of the living walls the crystal streams descend in murmuring falls. No hawsers need to bind the vessels here, nor bearded anchors, for no storms they fear. 7 ships within this happy harbour met, the thin remainders of the scattered fleet. The Trojans, worn with toils and spent with woes, leap on the welcome land and seek their wished repose. First, good Achates, with repeated strokes of clashing flints their hidden fire provokes. Short flame succeeds a bed of withered leaves, the dying sparkles in their fall receives. Caught into life in fiery fumes they rise, and fed with stronger food invade the skies. The Trojans, dropping wet or standing around the cheerful blaze or lie along the ground. Some dry their corn, infected with the brine, then grind with morsels and prepare to dine. Æneas climbs the mountain's airy brow, and takes a prospect of the seas below. If Capus thence or Antaeus he could spy, or see the streamers of Caicus fly. No vessels were in view, but on the plain 3 beamy stacks command a lordly train. Of branching heads the more ignoble throng attend their stately steps and slowly graze along. He stood, and while secure they fed below, he took the quiver and the trusty bow Carthage used to bear. The leaders first he laid along, and then the vulgar pierced. Nor ceased his arrows till the shady plain 7 mighty bodies with their blood they stain. For the 7 ships he made an equal share, and to the port returned triumphant from the war. The jaws of generous wine assessed this gift, when his Tranicarian shores the navy left. He set abroad, and for the feast prepared, in equal portions with the venison shared. Thus while he dealt it round the pious chief, with cheerful words allayed the common grief. Endure and conquer, Jove will soon dispose to future good our past and present woes. With me the rocks of Scylla you have tried, the inhumane Cyclops and his den defied. What greater ills hereafter can you bear? Resume your courage and dismiss your care. An hour will come with pleasure to relate your sorrows past as benefits of fate. Through various hazards and events we move to Latium and the realms foredoomed by Jove. Called to the sea, the promise of the skies, where Trojan kingdoms once again may rise. Endure the hardships of your present state, live and reserve yourselves for better fate. These words he spoke, but spoke not from his heart. His outward smiles concealed his inward smart. The jolly crew, unmindful of the past, the quarry share their plenteous dinner haste. Some strip the skin, some portion out the spoil, the limbs yet trembling in the cauldron's boil. Some on the fire the reeking entrails broil. Stretched on the grassy turf at ease they dine, restored their strength with meat and cheered their souls with wine. Their hunger thus appeased, their cares attends the doubtful fortune of their absent friends. Alternate hopes and fears their mind possess, whether to deem him dead or in distress. Above the rest Æneas mourns the fate of brave Orontes and the uncertain state of Gyas, Lycus, and of Amycus. The day, but not their sorrows, ended thus. When from aloft almighty Jove surveys earth, air, and shores, and navigable seas, at length on Libyan realms he fixed his eyes, whom pondering thus on human miseries. When Venus saw, she with a lowly look, not free from tears, her heavenly sire bespoke. O King of gods and men, whose awful hand disperseth thunder on the sea and land, disposing all with absolute command, how could my pious son thy power incense, or what, alas, is vanished Troy's offence? Or hope of Italy not only lost, on various seas by various tempests tossed, but shut from every shore, and bored from every coast. You promised once a progeny divine, of Romans rising from the Trojan line, in after times should hold the world in awe, and to the land and ocean give the law. How is your doom reversed which eased my care, when Troy was ruined in that cruel war? Then fates to fates I could oppose, but now, when fortune still pursues her former blow, what can I hope? What worse can still succeed? What end of labors has your will decreed? And Tenor, from the midst of Grecian hosts, could pass secure and pierce the Illyrian coasts, where, rolling down the steep Timavus raves, and through 9 channels disembokes her waves. At length he founded Padus a happy seat, and gave his Trojans a secure retreat. There fixed their arms, and there renewed their name, and there in quiet rooms and crowned with fame. But we, descended from your sacred line, entitled to your heaven and rights divine, are banished earth, and for the wrath of one, removed from Latium and the promised throne. Are these our scepters, these our due rewards? And is it thus that Jove his plighted fate records? To whom the father of the immortal race, smiling with that serene, indulgent face, with which he drives the clouds and clears the skies, first gave a holy kiss, then thus replies: Daughter, dismiss thy fears, to thy desire the fates of thine are fixed and stand entire. Thou shalt behold thy wished Lavinian walls, and ripe for heaven when fate Æneas calls. Then shalt thou bear him up sublime to me. No counsels have reversed my firm decree, and lest new fears disturb thy happy state, know I have searched the mystic rolls of fate. Thy son, nor is the appointed season far, in Italy shall wage successful war, shall tame fierce nations in the bloody field, and sovereign laws impose and cities build, till after every foe subdued the sun tries to the signs his annual race shall run. This is his time prefixed. Ascanius then, now called Iulius, shall begin his reign. He 30 rolling years the crown shall wear, then from Lavinium shall the seat transfer, and with hard labor Alba Longa built, the throne with his succession shall be filled. 300 circus more, Then shall be seen Æneid the fair, a priestess and a queen, who, full of remorse in time with kindly throes, shall at a birth two godly boys disclose. The royal babes a tawny wolf shall drain. Then Romulus his grandsire's throne shall gain. Of martial towers the founder shall become. The people Romans call the city Rome. To them no bounds of empire I assign, nor term of years to their immortal line. Even haughty Juno, who, with endless broils, earth, seas, and heaven, and Jove himself turmoils, at length atoned, her friendly power shall join to cherish and advance the Trojan line. The subject world shall Rome's dominion own, and prostrate shall adore the nation of the gown. And age is ripening in revolving fate, when Troy shall overturn the Grecian state, and sweet revenge her conquering sons shall call, to crush the people that conspired her fall. Then Caesar from the Julian stock shall rise, whose empire ocean and whose fame the skies alone shall bound, whom fraught with eastern spoils our heaven the just reward of human toils surely shall repay with rites divine, and incense shall ascend before his sacred shrine. Then dire debate and impious war shall cease, and the stern age be softened into peace. Then banished faith shall once again return, and vestal fires in hallowed temples burn, and Remus with Genius shall sustain the righteous laws and fraud and force restrain. Janus himself before his fane shall wait, and keep the dreadful issues of his gate, with bulls and iron boars within remains, imprisoned fury bound in brazen chains. High on a trophy raised of useless arms, he sits and threats the worlds with vain alarms. He sat and sent Selenius with command to free the ports and ope the Punic lands to Trojan guests, lest ignorant of fate, the queen might force them from her town and state. Down from the steep of heaven Selenius flies, and cleaves with all his wings the yielding skies. Soon on the Libyan shore descends the god, performs his message and displays his rod. The surly murmurs of the people cease, and as the fates require, they give the peace. The queen herself suspends the rigid laws, the Trojans pities and protects their cause. Meantime, in shades of night Æneas lies. Care seized his soul and sleep forsook his eyes. But when the sun restored the cheerful day, he rose the coast and country to survey. Anxious and eager to discover more, it looked a wild, uncultivated shore. But whether humankind or beast alone possessed the newfound region was unknown. Beneath a ledge of rocks his fleet he hides. Tall trees surround the mountain's shady sides. The bending brow above a safe retreat provides. Armed with two-pointed darts he leaves his friends, and true Arcadis on his steps attends. Lo, in the deep recesses of the wood, before his eyes his goddess mother stood, a huntress in her habit and her mien, her dress a maid, her air confessed a queen. Bare were her knees, and knots her garments bind. Loose was her hair, and wantoned in the wind. Her hand sustained a bow, her quiver hung behind. She seemed a virgin of the Spartan blood, with such array her police bestrode. Her Thracian courser, and outstripped the rapid flood. "Oh, strangers, have you lately seen," she said, "one of my sisters like myself arrayed, who crossed the lawn or in the forest strayed? A painted quiver at her back she bore, varied with spots, a lynx hide she wore, and at full cry pursued the tusky boar." Thus Venus, thus her son replied again, "None of your sisters have we heard or seen, O virgin, or what other name you bear, above that style, O more than mortal fair. Your voice and mien celestial birth betray, if, as you seem, the sister of the day, or one at least of chaste Diana's train. Let not an humble suppliant sue in vain, but tell a stranger long in tempest tossed, what earth we tread and who commands the coast. Then on your name shall wretched mortals call, and offered victims at your altars fall." "I dare not," she replied, "assume the name of goddess or celestial honors claim. For Tyrian virgins bows and quivers bear, and purple buskins over their ankles wear. Know, gentle youth, in Libyan lands you wore, a people root in peace and rough in war. The rising city which from afar you see is Carthage, an Tyrian colony. Phoenician Dido rules the growing state, who fled from Tyre to shun her brother's hate. Great were her wrongs, her story full of fate, which I will sum in short. Sychaeus known for wealth and brothers to the Punic throne, possessed fair Dido's bed, and either horde at once was wounded with an equal dart. Her father gave her yet a spotless maid, Pygmalion then the Tyrian scepter swayed, one who condemned divine and human laws. Then strife ensued, and cursed gold the cause. The monarch, blinded desire of wealth, with steel invades his brother's life by stealth. Before the sacred altar made him bleed, and long from her concealed the cruel deed. Some tale, some new pretense he daily coined, to soothe his sister and delude her mind. At length in dead of night the ghost appears, of her unhappy lord the scepter stares, and with erected eyes his bloody bosom bares. The cruel altars and his fate he tells, and the dire secret of his house reveals. Then warns the widow with her household gods, to seek a refuge in remote abodes. Last, to support her in so long a way, he shows her where his hidden treasure lay. Admonished thus and seized with mortal fright, the queen provides companions of her flight. They meet and all combine to leave the state, who hate the tyrant or who fear his hate. They seize a fleet which ready rigged they find, nor is Pygmalion treasure left behind. The vessels, heavy laden, put to sea, with prosperous wind a woman leads the way. I know not if by stress of weather driven, or whether their fatal course disposed by heaven. At last they landed where from far your eyes may view the turrets of New Carthage rise. There bought a space of ground which Byrsa called, from the bull's hide they first enclosed and walled. But whence are you? What country claims your birth? What seek you, strangers, on the Libyan earth? To whom, with sorrow streaming from his eyes, and deeply sighing, thus her son replies: Could you with patience hear I relate, O nymph, the tedious annals of our fate? To such a train of woes if I should run, the day would sooner than the tale be done. From ancient Troy by force expelled we came, if you by chance have heard the Trojan name. On various seas by various tempests tossed, at length we landed on the Libyan coast. The good Æneas am I called, a name, while fortune favored not unknown to fame. My household gods, companions of my wounds, with pious care I rescued from our foes. To fruitful Italy my course was bent, and from the King of Heaven is my descent. With twice 10 sail I crossed the Phrygian sea. Fate and my mother goddess left my way. Scarce 7 the thin remainders of my fleet from storms prevailed within your harbour meet. Myself distressed, an exile and unknown, debauched from Europe and from Asia thrown, in Libyan deserts wander thus alone. His tender parent could no longer bear, but interposing sought to soothe his care. Whoever you are, not unbeloved by heaven, since on our friendly shore your ships are driven, have courage, to the gods permit the rest, and to the queen expose your just request. Now take this earnest of success, for more your scattered fleet is joined upon the shore. The winds are changed, your friends from danger free, or I renounce my skill in augury. 12 swans behold in beauteous order move, and stoop with closing pinions from above, whom late the bird of Jove had driven along, and through the clouds pursued the scattering throng. Now, all united in a goodly team, they skim the ground and seek the quiet stream, as they, with joy returning, clap their wings, and ride the circuit of the skies in rings. Not otherwise your ships and every friend already hold the port, or with swift sails descend. No more advice is needful, but pursue the path before you and the town in view. Thus, having said, she turned and made appear, her neck refulgent and dishevelled hair, which, flowing from her shoulders, reached the ground, and widely spread ambrosial scents around. In length of train descend her sweeping gown, and by a graceful walk the Queen of Love is known. The Prince pursued the porting deity with words like these: "Ah, whither do you fly, unkind and cruel, to deceive your son, in borrowed shapes, and his embrace to shun? Never to bless my sight but thus unknown, and still to speak in accents not your own." Against the goddess these complaints he made, but took the path and her commands obeyed. They march obscure, for Venus kindly shrouds with mists their persons and involves in clouds, that thus unseen their passage none might stay, or force to tell the courses of their way. This port performed, the goddess flies sublime, to visit Paphos and her native clime, where garlands, evergreen and ever fair, with vows are offered and with solemn prayer. 100 altars in her temple smoke, 1,000 bleeding hearts her power invoke. They climb the next ascent, and, looking down, now at a nearer distant view the town. The Prince with wonder sees the stately towers, which late were huts and shepherds' homely bowers, the gates and streets, and hears from every port the noise and busy concourse of the mort. The toiling Tyrians on each other call, to ply their labor, some extend the wall. Some build the citadel, the brawny throng, or dig or push unwieldy stones along. Some for their dwelling chose a spot of ground, which, first designed with ditches, they surround. Some laws ordain, and some attend the choice of holy senates and elect by voice. Here some design a mole, while others there lay deep foundations for a theatre. From marble quarries mighty columns hew, for ornaments of scenes and future view. Such is their toil, and such their busy pains, and exercise the bees in flowery plains, when winter past and summer scarce begun invites them forth to labor in the sun. Some lend their youth abroad, while some condense their liquid store, and some in cells dispense. Some at the gate stand ready to receive the golden burthen and their friends relieve. All with united force combine to drive the lazy drones from the laborious hive. With envy stung they view each other's deeds, the fragrant works with diligence proceeds. Thrice happy you, whose walls already rise, Æneas sat, and viewed with lifted eyes their lofty towers, then entering at the gate, concealed in clouds, prodigious to relate. He mixed, unmoored among the busy throng, borne by the tide, and passed unseen along.